Namaste everyone. Good morning to the fellow countrymen across the globe, and good evening to all people here in India. So today we'll be talking about the applications of Indian mathematics, and of course about ancient Indian mathematicians' work. So I'll start my presentation about the fractal geometry and temple models. So I'll begin with the first part of my talk. I'll begin this talk with one experience I had. So I had been to Nasik some 15 years back, 15 or 16 years back, to KK Engineering College. And over there, we saw an experiment of 3D holographic projection. Why I'm starting my talk with something as modern as 3D holographic projection will become quite clear soon. I had this, we had conducted this experiment on 3D holographic projection using lasers. So now a hologram is produced on a high resolution photographic plate. Today's young generation might never have seen those film cameras, but they can maybe Google it and learn about it. So hologram is produced on a high resolution photographic plate using monochromatic. A monochromatic means a single color laser and optics, like a beam splitter. And this holographic image is captured without using a camera. You are not using a lens or a camera. You are just using lasers and optics such as beam splitters. A three-dimensional holographic image of the same is then projected using the film and monochromatic lasers. So now if we have that film, a negative, if we cut it into 4 parts, then each of the part will still give us the same 3D image. We can still project the same 3D image using any of the 4 parts. We can cut any of these 4 pieces into still smaller pieces and still project the same 3D image. It means that each fragment of the film contains the information of the whole. Now the Greek word holo is a combining form meaning whole or entire. A hologram actually stores the interference pattern of the laser light that is reflected from the object. Like at Nasik, we had captured a 3D holographic image of a Ganesh Murti. So what a hologram stores is the interference pattern of the laser light that was reflected from the Ganesh Murti. Now, why I am describing holography here will soon become clear. So we will start our talk with a Purnam Shanti mantra. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Now this Purnam Shanti mantra is from the Ishavasya Upanishad. What is the meaning of this mantra? It means that the Supreme Being, Paramatma, is Purna. It means it is self-reliant. It doesn't depend upon anything else outside of itself. Our Atma is evolved from that Paramatma. It is a fragment of that infinite Supreme Being. Hence, we have derived from Paramatma. So even our Atma is complete. It is Purna and has the same characteristics as those of Paramatma. Our Atma is a replica of the Paramatma. Now, Paramatma, the Supreme Being, is Anant or infinite. Hence, when we take a small fragment out of it, it still remains Purna or complete. According to ancient Indian or Hindu Sankhya Darshan Shastra, cosmos or Brahmand is holonomic. This means that the structure of Brahmand replicates itself at ever decreasing scales. Means it is self-similar at ever decreasing scales. Like a hologram, each fragment, like Harek Kan, Brahmand ka Harek Kan, is complete in itself and contains information of the whole. Now the entire cosmos can be visualized in a cosmic egg or a microscopic capsule known as the Pind Brahmand. Now you must have realized the parallels between the modern physics and ancient Indian or ancient Hindu philosophy. Now you must have realized why especially I've taken the example of holographic projection. That if I make smaller pieces of the holographic film, it still gives me the entire image. It means every fragment contains the information of the whole. And our Brahmand, the structure of Brahmand is such that it is holonomic. Every fragment contains the information of the whole. Means it is self-similar. It replicates itself at ever decreasing scales. Now our Rishi or the ancient sages laid down the rules or the basic canons for art and architecture. They said that all man-made objects and structures like Bhavan Nirman should maintain harmony with the Brahmand or the cosmos. In accordance with this tradition, even Hindu temples are designed to be symbolic representations of the models of the cosmos. Every small part of the temple should be a replica, self-similar of the whole. Now, Vastu Shastra had laid down detailed rules and procedures for preparing the designs of the temples. Raja Bhoj, the 11th century scholar king of Malwa, Raja Bhoj, had compiled one such book known as the Samrangad Sutradhar. Now, Samrangad Sutradhar laid down detailed or comprehensive ideas for designing of, say, palaces, temples, town planning, how to draw line diagrams, instructions for the site supervisor, how to construct construction machinery. So all that was covered in Samrangan Sutradhar. And one American architect, Adam Hardy, has actually produced very good translations of Samrangan Sutradhar with a lot of pictures and line drawings for people to understand ancient Indian Vastu Shastra. Now, ancient Indian Vastukar engineers were expert geometrists. They used their skills in creating detailed layout of temples and in building them. They had great skills to create detailed layouts and then how to construct them, how to convert those designs into physical reality. So now I've been talking about the Purnam Shanti Mantra, the Pind Brahmand concept. So let us undertake one activity. Maybe if you have pen and pencil or paper and pen nearby you, you can carry out this activity alongside. Now let us do one activity to understand the kind of geometry that is utilized in preparing the layout of the temples. First, let us do a very simple task. Let us draw an equilateral triangle. that you can see on the screen. As a step 2, let us connect the midpoints of all the 3 sides. So now we have a central triangle. So let us remove that central triangle. So we get 3 smaller triangles. Now again, let us connect the midpoints of the new triangles and remove the central triangles. So now we have got 9 new triangles. Now let us repeat the same procedure again. So now you see that at every stage, we are creating self-similar shapes or a self-replicating shape. Now every part of the complex figure we just created is a replica of the whole. The design evolves with the execution of each step. Now this particular pattern is known as the Sierpinski's gasket or Sierpinski's triangle. And you can see with every step, the complexity of the shape increases. It evolves with execution of every step. Now, geometry of self-replicating shapes is known as fractal geometry. Now, if you are a nature lover and you go around seeing flora and fauna, or if you go around seeing natural geological formations, nature is full of such shapes. Actually, nature is not having any straight edges or sharp corners. Now, this fractal geometry can be found in clouds, coastline, river deltas, lightning, icicles, mountain ranges, ferns. If you look at the leaf of a fern, it's a compound leaf and it has similar such patterns. Cyclones, hurricanes, and much more. Now we will take look at one more such fractal pattern. So we have a square, and this is similar to your Sierpinski's triangle or gasket. This is actually Sierpinski's carpet. So we have a square. We remove we create a pattern of 9 squares. Remove the central or the mid square. Then again repeat the same pattern. Again repeat the same pattern. Now this is a animated GIF which shows you the procedure of creating that Sierpinski's gasket. Sierpinski's carpet. Now this is the coach curve. This can be found in clouds, icicles. Of course, we don't get to see it here in Mumbai or in India, most of the part of India, except if you go to the Himalayas or North India. But you must be seeing it quite often in Canada. Frost crystals that are formed on your glass panes. Those are fractal patterns. Then when you apply very high voltage across the acrylic plate, so you get the breakdown of the, what you say, a dielectric. So it is similar to your lightning. So you can see such fractal pattern. And this kind of fractal patterns are known as a Lichtenberg figure. Now this is similar to what you see a kind of cauliflower or a 3D flower, a fractal 3D fractal pattern or a 3D flower. The word fractal geometry was coined by Benoit Mandelbrot, who was a Polish-born French-American mathematician. Now, Benoit Mandelbrot was working for IBM in the 60s. So he did a comprehensive study of the geometry of self-similar, self-replicating shapes. And he used computers and computer software to create images or create art having self-similar shapes. But in India, fractal geometry, knowledge of fractal geometry was there, and it was implemented in art and architecture since last almost 1800 years. It was used to create detailed layouts of temples. If you look at any temple, ancient Indian temple or even medieval Indian temples, so they are never like your typical apartment buildings, which are like matchbox or rectangular boxes. They are very intricate and sophisticated in design. They are not like matchbox or square boxes. They are more intricate layouts. Now, intricate designs of every part of a temple are made using fractal geometry. Now, I'll give you one a very famous example. The Shikhar of Kandaria Mahadev temple at Khajuraho. This is the Kandaria Mahadev temple at Khajuraho. Now, the design of the Shikhar of Kandaria Mahadev temple at Khajuraho, which was built during the 11th century AD, has been created using fractal geometry. So here you have the main Shikhar, and then surrounding that main Shikhar, you have smaller replicas of it. Now, these smaller replicas are again surrounded by still smaller replicas. And this pattern is repeated at ever decreasing scales. So you can see the pattern over here, the main Shikhar, then the smaller Shikhar surrounding it, still smaller replicas of the Shikhars are surrounding it. A different view of the same Shikhars. From a view from the other side, from the front. Now, most of the ancient Indian temples had a water tank or a kund at the entrance of the temple. You always had a kund. Means you had a purifying or the ritual bath in the tank, and then you used to enter the temple. Even the staircases or the stepways of that water tank are designed using fractal patterns. Now you will find a pattern similar to Sierpinski's gasket or Sierpinski's triangle in the staircases of the water tank at the Surya Mandir at Modhera, Gujarat, which was also built during the 11th century AD or almost 1,000 years ago. Now you can see the shape is similar to Sierpinski's gasket or Sierpinski's triangle. And many of you might have even seen pictures, or you may have visited the Chand Baudi at Abhaneri in Rajasthan, which is actually some 7 to 8 stories down. So it has a typical a fractal pattern, Chand Baudi at Abhaneri in Rajasthan. In many Bollywood movies also, they have shot some scenes at that Chand Baudi. Now we look at this temple. This is the Natya Sabha, the Natya Mandap at Sabha Mandap at Surya Mandir at Modhera, Gujarat. And you can see a pattern similar to Sierpinski's triangle, which is actually the staircase of the water tank. Now, if you look at this Sabha Mandap or the Natya Graha at Modhera Surya Mandir, you don't see a kind of a square box or a square hall, a rectangular hall. You can see the jagged edges of the temple, or what you know, what is called as the fractalization. Or fractals also mean broken. So this is that is why if you look at the ancient or medieval Indian temples or Hindu temples, they don't have rectangular shape. They have jagged edges or projections within projections. At Ambarnath near Mumbai, We have a 1,000-year-old Ambarnath temple, a Prachin Shiv Mandir, and you can see this temple. Even that has a jagged edges. Means the layout of the temple is using iterations or fractalization. This is the other side view of the Ambarnath Shivalaya at near Mumbai. Now, rest of the world has been using fractal geometry since last 50, 60 years. Whereas in India, we have been using that extensively in art and architecture since last 1700 years. So Indian mathematics is an invaluable gift to the world of art and architecture. So that is the end of the first part of my talk. Samirji, shall we have a question answer on this part now, or after my second part is over?
After the second part is over, we'll have a combined question answer.
Sure, no issues. So I'll go for the second part.
Thanks.
Now this verse is from Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati. So the verse was from Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati. Bhaskaracharya was born in the 12th century AD, 1114 AD to be precise. Bhaskaracharya had composed the book Leelavati in 1150 AD to teach mathematics to his daughter Leelavati, after whom he named the book. Now this book is entirely in verse, means it is in chand, poetic meter. It is composed in poetic meter. It's a poetry. The entire book is like a poetry. Now it covers topics like arithmetic, basic arithmetic, algebra, geometry, mensuration, combinatorics, number theory, and other basic topics. Now this book, Leelavati, was used as a textbook, a standard textbook for almost 700 years across the entire country. Then with the advent of the British Macaulay style education, slowly we started forgetting this treasure of Indian mathematics. It's a very sorry state that we ourselves ignored this such a treasure, but this book was used as a standard textbook across the country in all the village gurukuls. So now let us look at and Leelavati had very interesting problems. They were like, okay, the kind of puzzles or riddles. So they were very interesting problems and fun to solve. So students never get bored doing mathematics. So, and examples in Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati were connected to your day-to-day life. So let us look at one very interesting and problem. Lord Shiv holds 10 different weapons. Now Lord Shiv has 5 heads, hence he has 5 pairs of hands, that is 10 hands. Lord Shiv holds 10 different weapons, namely a pash or a trap, ankush, sarp, damru, kapal, a shul, that is a spear, khatwang or a club, a missile, an arrow, and a bow. Now find the number of different Shiva idols. Similarly, solve the problem for Vishnu idols. Lord Vishnu has 4 objects. We know that Narayan, Lord Narayan or Vishnu Bhagwan, has 4 arms, and each of the 4 arms have a ayudh. And they are Shankh, Padma, Gada, and Chakra. Sudarshan Chakra. So we have a Shankh, Padma means lotus, Gada and Sudarshan Chakra. So now, suppose we have got two objects, namely A and B. So we can arrange them in two different ways. Okay, in the first position, we can have a and in the we can have a B. So we have two options for the first position, A or B. So in the second position, I can have a B. Here in the second position, I can have a. So I have, if I've got two objects, I can arrange them in two different ways, AB and BA. Suppose I've got three objects and I want to arrange them. Then in the first position, I have got these three options, A, B, or C. Then in the second position, I have got two options. And in the third position, I've got only one option. So if I've got three objects, I can arrange them in 3 times 2 times 1. That is, I can arrange three objects in 6 different ways. Suppose I've got 4 objects, A, B, C, D. So I can have 4 options for the first position. I have 3 options for the second position, 2 options for the third position, and only 1 option for the fourth position. So I can arrange 4 objects in 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. That is 24 different ways. So if I got 4 different objects, I can arrange them in 24 different ways. So we can have a general formula, which is known as the fundamental counting principle. I can arrange n objects in n times n minus 1 times n minus 2 times so on times 3 times 2 times 1. That is, in general, we call it n factorial ways. So 4 factorial ways is 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. That is 24 different ways. And if you have 6 different objects, they can be arranged in 6 factorial ways. That is 720 ways. So Lord Shiv, Shankar Bhagwan, Mahadev, holds a weapon in each of his 10 arms. Now these 10 weapons can be arranged in 10 factorial ways, and that's a very huge number, 36,28,800 different ways. So 10 ayudh or 10 weapons can be arranged in around 36 lakh different ways. So it is not humanly possible to create so many forms of Lord Vishnu. Whereas Lord Shiv, it is not humanly possible to create so many different forms of Lord Shiv or Mahadev. Whereas Lord Vishnu holds 4 ayudhs and they can be arranged in 24 different ways. So we can create 24 different forms of Lord Vishnu. That is, we have 24 different forms of Lord Vishnu with 24 names. Now, all the 24 forms of Lord Vishnu, they have the same sculpture, which look alike. The only differing thing is the position of the 4 ayudh. Now, every arrangement has a unique name. Every arrangement has a unique name. So you have 24 arrangements and 24 names. And this collection, this group of 24 names is collectively called Chaturvimshati Keshav Naama. Chatur means 4, Vimshati means 20. Means 24 different names of Keshav or Narayan. Now we know that there are infinite names of Lord Narayan, but this 24 names or Chaturvimshati Keshav Naama has a special significance because they are recited during the Sandhya Vandanam. When you do the Sandhya Vandanam, during the rituals of Sandhya Vandanam, you recite this 24 names of Lord Vishnu. Every name has a unique arrangement of 4 ayudh. So I will give you the list of all the 24 names, and the order of objects in the Lord's arms. So these are the names: Keshav, Narayan, Madhav, Govind, Vishnu, Madhusudan, Trivikram, Vaman, Sridhar, Rishikesh, Padmanabh, Damodar, Vasudev, Sankarshan, Vasudev, Pradyumna, Anirudh, Purushottam, Adojaksha, Narsimha, Achyut, Janardhan, Upendra, Hari, and Krishna. Now, since last 4 years, that is after the demonetization, RBI has come out with a new 100 rupee note. And on that new 100 rupee note, you see the picture or the image of Rani Ki Vav, or the Queen's Stepwell at Patan in Gujarat. So in March of 2016, I had visited Rani Ki Vav and had clicked pictures of the sculptures there. So some 15 of the 24 forms of Lord Vishnu are represented in beautiful sculptures over there. Then here in Mumbai, at Fanaswadi in Mumbai, there's a Balaji temple, which is also known as the Venkateshwara temple. At the Balaji temple, there are sculptures of all the 24 forms of Lord Vishnu. On the outer walls, exterior walls of that Balaji temple at Fanaswadi, you have the sculptures of all the 24 forms of Lord Vishnu. And I also got to know from a friend of mine that at Chennakeshav temple at Somnathpura in Karnataka, the exterior walls of Keshav temple or the Chennakeshav temple at Somnathpura in Karnataka, you have the sculptures of all the 24 forms of Lord Vishnu on the exterior walls. So that is one place that you need to visit. It is actually the Hoysala era temple or the Hoysala architecture temple, a beautiful temple with amazing sculptures over there. So I'll show you pictures of Rani Ki Vav. This is the Rani Ki Vav. You can even see the image on the new 100 rupee note. This is from the other side of the Queen's Chapel or the Rani Ki Vav. And these are the Narayan, Murtis of Narayan at Rani Ki Vav. You can see the different arrangement of Ayodh in Lord Vishnu's hands and arms. Okay. So Samirji, I end my talk here. We can go for that question answer or discussion.
Not a question. I would like to add it as a comment. The word Leelavati, the meaning of the word Leela in Sanskrit is amusement or child's play. So if you see the text Leelavati, it is a very small text compared to the other mathematical texts in the literature. So a traditional text, and the matter discussed in that is also elementary level. Though it has lots of things, but it is of the school children level. That's not a higher mathematics. So instead of saying that Leelavati, there are many controversies in the literature that the discussion is there. Leelavati being the daughter of Bhaskaracharya or not, the word itself tells that content is related to the child's play or amusement. And that is really the actual thing is mathematics could be taught in the recreational manner. And that small text which has mathematics which can be taught in the amusement manner is Leelavati. This is one anecdote I thought I should share.
Yeah, I would like to share something with you, with everyone. There is a even older text by Mahaviracharya, a Jain monk.
And another one more thing was this all over India. I don't know, but Kerala definitely there were different mathematics texts and many other India country all over India there were different texts of mathematics prevailing. And if when you said that fractals were not known to the world since very recently, that is also I think disputable because in our studies we have seen lots of examples of various parts of words, ancient architectures, and the fractals were developed. We can see the fractal dimensions and fractal designs in that.
But yeah, if you can see a structured or a you can say a comprehensive study, a formal study of fractals started only some 50, 60 years back of fractal geometry.
But that formal study has never started in India also, no, in the recent years. What we are talking about the ancient things, and the ancient things are available at different parts of world. And I would like, instead of being biased towards something as an academics, I would like to have a
Ambuja we will take, you can take this discussion offline. We'll give the next
thank you so
speaker
much.
a chance. Atulji.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, Chandrahas ji. It's a very interesting It's a very interesting and detailed analysis. I have two questions.
Yeah. Sure.
One thing is relating to maths. It says that in India, in the ancient disease, we had the very huge number up to 1 followed by 53 which is named as Padarth. Any reason why and why we had such a numbers and where it has been used? Any idea about this?
Yeah, you can you repeat because I couldn't hear Pararth. I could pick up. Can you?
In India, there is a number system. We have 100, then hajar, that is 1,000, then lakh, crore. Lakh is 1 followed by 50. Crore is 1 followed by 70.
10 raised to 60. Yeah. Pararth.
10 raised to 53. 10 raised to 53 is Pararth. In fact, the detail you have it in the Nehru Science Center also. In the Nehru Science Center, the whole. Yeah, in the Nehru Science Center, you have the full chart also, all these things. I'm just trying to. I'm amazed at where they must have been using this and where all these things we have found all these details. Historicity of this.
Actually, even in ancient Jain text, ancient Buddhist text, there are even larger numbers. There are even larger numbers. And I will give you a reference of one book, The Universal History of Numbers by Georges Ifra. He has done a lot of research on this development of number systems across the globe, especially has devoted almost 60 to 70% of his book on Indian mathematics or how numbers evolved in India. And so ancient Indians had a fascination for infinity, Anant, and large numbers. And they had named such large, you can say, large powers.
They had some name for these things.
Yeah. So one, you can say astronomy or astronomical distances. And philosophy, I don't know much about philosophy, but yeah, they used to deal with huge numbers. So many texts have such things. So Nehru Center has just one listing of it.
Acha, my second question is regarding this. In fact, on the WhatsApp,
we'll take your second question next. We'll give others chance. Yeah. Oppo.
Hello. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Clearly, loud and clear. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to know that you said that Bhaskaracharyaji's mathematics chapters were in the form of poetry. So was it a tradition that, maybe Aryabhatta, because I have not gone through all this literature. So I just wanted to know that whatever mathematics was taught in India, maybe 1,000 years, 2,000 years back, all were in the form of poetry?
Yeah, they used to basically, a lot of sutra were composed in using chand, but I would not say everything was in poetry. Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati was especially in poetry, and a few years back when we were celebrating 900 years of Bhaskaracharya, some group in Mumbai had actually performed a ballet based on Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati. There was a program some years back in Mumbai, which I had attended. They had actually recited Bhaskaracharya, a part of Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati has a song, like you had a music and a song.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good discovery maybe for our education system.
And Bhaskaracharya must
Children
have
can be
been
taught
mathematics. Yeah, and if you look at other text, other ancient Indian text, one of them I can quote, that is Mahaviracharya's Ganit Sar Sangraha. Even Ganit Sar Sangraha had and Ganit Kaumudi by other ancient Indian mathematicians. They had very interesting problems which are like puzzles or riddles. Unlike what we have, some abstract problems or exercise problems in today's text. So Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati, of course, it comes much later than the ancient Indian mathematics work, because as Ambuja madam said, that Leela means a child's play, like we had Krishna Leela. So some may contest that claim that Leelavati was not Bhaskaracharya's daughter, but yeah, Leelavati was my grandmother. And I learned mathematics from my grandmother. But yeah, besides that, our main concern is that even Ganit Sar Sangraha had very interesting problems. And like Pingadacharya, who was a prosodist, a person who studied Chand, he developed binary number systems and algorithms and a lot of ways to calculate like quick exponential calculation, a lot of algorithms he had developed. Yeah.
So thank you. I think it's interesting.
You can go now.
Yeah.
Hi, Chandrahas. This was really interesting, and it's so nice that all these things are now.
Your voice is
low, Nalini ji.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Give me a... Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So, we were reading somewhere that in some of the olden temples where they make these floral patterns in stone. And sometimes the petals, there were 13 petals and it was a round. So it said that 360 degrees actually cannot be divided by 13, and the outer circle had 27, which is also, they are both prime numbers, and the 360 cannot be divided. So would
I would, before answering the question, I would like to tell you that don't go by all the WhatsApp forwards.
No, yeah, but this is...
because this is going viral on the WhatsApp or the social media, and people who forward such things on social media, either they don't know maths or they have never done read the text. You can't quote out of hand. So, okay, you can say, okay, you don't have integer division, but yeah, you can divide, na?
Yeah, you can divide.
I can divide 10 in 6 parts.
Sure. That's how we do scales in geography also. We make scales.
Then you had all geometric constructions to divide an angle into, say, 7 parts, or divide circle in 7 parts.
Right.
Okay, you have let us say you have a thread. So you kind of wind the thread around a circle, and then you can divide it into 7 parts. So that can be done. Those techniques, geometric techniques of constructions, were known to ancient Indians. One of our oldest mathematics texts, that is Sulba Sutra, Baudhayan's Sulba Sutra, is on geometry. How you used to construct Vedis or the Vedic altars. They had geometry. Even if you look at the Indus Valley or the Sindhu Saraswati Sabhyata, so there that what you can say, the bricks, they were always in some basic proportions. So they had weights and measures standardized. So they were, even they knew geometry.
Yeah, that is how we actually draw our scales also, right? Because we did a line which is actually, not divisible by, let's say, 5 or 6 divisions, but we still do it.
So generally what happens, a lot of people also send me those WhatsApp forwards. And sometimes I tell them thank you, and sometimes I actually tell them, okay, you go and refer to this text. You'll get the exact knowledge.
Right. Thank you so much.
WhatsApp forwards are doing a lot of disservice.
Oh, yes, definitely. We absolutely. So it's good to have them confirmed from somebody so that next time it comes. I mean, normally they're trying these days to at least verify before doing it. So thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Haresh ji, please go ahead.
Namaste and good morning to all. First of all, thank you for organizing such a wonderful seminar, and thanks to speaker as well. I have
Jai Shri Krishna, Haresh bhai.
Jai Shri Krishna. Bhau anand thyo aanke sunine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to you and organizers both. I have two things, one question and one want to share as you suggest. So the question is, does the pyramid of Babylon has any connection with the geometry you said about the fractal geometry? That is the question.
I didn't get your question properly.
Is the pyramids of Babylon has any connection related
pyramids,
to
I don't know about Babylon. Pyramids of Egypt.
Sorry, Egypt. Has any connection with the fractal geometry you discussed just now?
No. Can you show me the self-replicating shapes or self-similar shapes?
Okay. No, shape is conical. Pyramid shape.
What is a fractal geometry? Fractal geometry is the geometry of self-similar or self-replicating shapes at ever-decreasing scales.
Okay.
So does it have a self-replicating shape? No. They are just pyramidal in shape.
Okay. And one thing I would like to share with respect to the large number one of the participants asked about. So in Hanuman Chalisa we know the line coming Jug Sahasra Jojan Parabhanu Lilyo Taki Madur Falajan. So there it is said that the distance from Earth to Sun in the Chopai form. And many references are available on the net for that.
Yeah, but then a lot of people blog and write articles on internet, but they don't have the credibility that an academic or a research journal has. Of course, we can refer to Aryabhatiya or Brahmasphut Siddhant, which gives us more precise and accurate astronomical data and concepts. I would suggest instead of going for those WhatsApp forwards or internet posting, we refer more to the text. We have primary references rather than the hearsay or what people.
I agree with your saying. One should refer to the primary source only.
Sources, yeah.
As far as the application part is concerned, of the large number, can be considered as a spatial or astronomical measuring of the distance.
Yeah.
Okay. Indranil ji, you can go now.
Yes, thank you. Sir, am I audible?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I just have two basic questions. The first one is we spoke about fractal geometry. So is there any specific terminology they used to describe this kind of geometry in ancient text? This is the first question because it's visible in all the temples. But just I want to know the terminology if they use. And the second question is, you spoke about the attributes in the hands of Shiva and Vishnu. So what is the source where you got those attributes? Because before 6th century, we cannot see Padma in the hands of a Vishnu.
Okay. Hey,
So,
I'm referring to a problem. I'm referring to a problem in Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati. So yeah, this is the
great.
problem.
Okay.
So
Yes.
this is, as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, second part of my talk, that this is a problem from Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So I'm from maths and engineering background. So I'm quoting from Indian mathematics. So if you ask me more about say, Sankhya Darshan Shastra, I don't know much about that. But yeah, maths, engineering, yeah, I'm a practitioner of engineering maths. I teach engineering maths. I write research papers on engineering maths and Indian mathematics.
Yes.
So I can quote, I can show you the, okay, this is the problem from Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati, or this is a sutra from Pingada's Chand Shastra. That I can quote. But then if you ask me, okay, before 6th century, there was no Padma, then okay, then it's a question comes from the Puran. You'll have to ask an expert from Puran. Or
no
the
problem, sir.
Shilpa
Makes
Shastra.
sense. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Makes sense.
I don't want to give opinions or...
You can go
no
next.
problem. Yes. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Arji?
Yes. Hello, sir. Thanks for giving an opportunity. Thanks for a beautiful explanation. You have explained everything in India only. Where can we see this practical geometry, similar kind of patterns outside of India? And what word they have used instead of practical geometry? Because it came
actually, I asked a Sanskrit expert whether there is a word for such a geometry. Pratikruti. In Hindi, we call it pratikruti. Swayam ki pratikruti. Replica means pratikruti. To replicate, pratikruti. So I asked a Sanskrit expert whether there's any term that is used for a self-replicating or a self-similar bhumiti or geometry. So I've not come across a term. Maybe I need to ask a person who is an expert in Vastu Shastra or people who study Vastu Shastra or the text for Vastu Shastra.
Okay.
Then I can maybe come across that term. I need to do that research or survey.
Outside of India, do we have a similar kind of a patterns, kind of a building or any other places?
Yes, Southeast Asia. If you look at they have temples. No, they were inspired by Indian architecture. Angkor Wat. That's one of the biggest temple complex. Maybe they must be having it. To write this particular thing, I had referred to research papers written by architects who are expert in temple architecture, or and even researchers from foreign universities. They have done research on Samarangad Sutradhar, and they have visited Indian temples and studied Indian temple architecture. So my focus was more on mathematics. I'm not an architect. Yeah, as an engineer, I can understand construction technology because I know aspects of structural engineering. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
VSG, please go ahead.
Hello. Namaskar.
Namaste.
My name is Vinayak Sathe. I'm also engineer background, engineering and scientific background. Yeah. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna.
I have one question. If you see the ancient wisdom or the mathematical proofs using the geometrical, axioms or geometrical examples, right? You solve many different problems creatively. Those can be used in computer, any new application like in supercomputers on quantum physics. Are we using that to solve the complex problems? Do you know how applicability of this?
I didn't get you exactly what you are alluding to.
Yeah, so I'm trying to see the applicability of this fractals. You mentioned, from the ancient scriptures or temples, there are examples of this. So the applicability of this into the current modern complex problems in, see the quantum computing or in supercomputers solving the complex problems. Is there any applicability?
No, at present I am not aware of any such things. And of course, computers are a different thing. But if you really want to see connections of, say, ancient Indian maths and computers, you can refer to Chandrahas, the 8th chapter of Chandrahas, which is dealing with say binary number systems, radix conversion. That is converting decimal to binary or binary to decimal. Then, of course, combinatorics, what we call Pascal's triangle, is actually Pinger's Varna Meru, which later was coined, like Halai used to call them Meru Prastar, or Bhaskaracharya used to call it Khanda Meru. Like I'll just, if I Bhaskaracharya used to call it Khanda Meru. It was in Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati, it is called Khanda Meru, whereas Pingar had called it Varna Meru. What we call Pascal's triangle was actually Pingar's Varna Meru, or Halai used to call it Meru Prastar. So that is where, okay, you can say connection between Indian maths and computer science. You can draw analogies, but then fractals and quantum computing, these are two different things. Or computer science are different things. Maybe you can use, you can create fractal patterns in computers. That is what people have been doing.
I have one question. Like, if there's all the biomimicry, the area field of biomimicry, the replications of the one cell makes it 2 cells, 2 to 4, and all that. It's self-replicating. So if we use this fractal, whether we can create how these microorganisms are getting growth of microorganisms, how they will be looking like, or what other characteristics and all that.
See, let's stick to the basics. Like fractals means self-similar patterns or self-replicating patterns. And what you say, biomimicry, okay, nowadays a lot of engineers are inspired by nature. Like you have a spider's web, and you have you have that lightweight tensile structures. Like I have actually written one article on this, what you say, biomimicry. Like you have the spider's web and tensile structures. You have this, I forgot the name. This Modi ji gave this Howdy Modi program. Was done at that which place? It was in
Houston, Texas. Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. But that complex is a lightweight tensile structure. The roof of that structure is a lightweight tensile structure, and it is inspired by a spider's web. Actually, on my blog, you can see an article, spider's web. Actually, I've clicked the picture of a spider's web. And spider's web is a classic example of a lightweight tensile structure. And I have written about that. Structural engineering or the mechanics part of it.
Okay. Yeah. So the mechanics.
Neeraj Joshi, you're next.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, shall I ask my question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for the pictures. They were really good. I like the pictures particularly. Basically, in ancient times, what were the strategic advantages of fractal geometry? What were the kind of political benefits of that, of building buildings like that?
Pardon?
What were the strategic advantages of building buildings like that?
Okay, apart from your spiritual or the religious, social benefits, let us come to the strategic. That every king, like if he want to kind of demonstrate his power or demonstrate his influence, they will build magnificent structures to kind of exhibit their technical prowess, to exhibit their financial strength, or exhibit their military strength. So that might have been one strategic kind of maybe thing to kind of go for this building such magnificent structures. And India had, of course, great abilities, technical abilities to kind of build magnificent structures. Like we have the Kailash temple at Ellora Caves. That's world's largest monolithic structure, kind of carved out from a single hillock. Kailash temple at Ellora. And as an engineer, I would say it is like 1400, 1500 years back, from a single hill, you have carved out a monolithic structure, an entire temple. Around maybe 1.4 lakh tons of rock was carved out or removed from that hillock. Or the Elephanta Caves near Mumbai. So maybe they had that strategic thing that, okay, they want to kind of exhibit their technology, their military might, or their financial or economic power.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Welcome.
Rajendra Lekhwarji.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sir, I just have a very small doubt. I won't take your much time. I'm from Department of Mathematics, sir, like pure mathematics. I just wanted to know one thing regarding this particular thing, like fractal geometry. Can I say, or can I, inform students like fraction itself is derived from fractals, or it is derived from some word called fracture? Because when we talk about fraction meaning numerator must be less than denominator.
Okay. I'm not aware of about the etymology of those words, so I can't make an opinion.
Okay, sir. Okay, no problem.
I'm sorry, but I don't know everything. I can't give any opinion offhand.
All right, so that's perfectly all right. Thank you very much.
Atulji.
Yeah, good evening, Chandrahasji. Once again, I wanted to know, you have mentioned that the fractal architecture may have been used in this temple. Do we have we found any instruments? Mean to say that hello? Yeah, have you found any instrument like rulers and all these things? What all instruments actually we have found, so that they are using these instruments to multiply? Because maybe scientists like Aryabhat or these people must have been having lots of knowledge, but it has to be transcribed to some beautiful temple or beautiful ideal of the god. You knowledge translate.
I got the idea. Even if you, I mentioned about Samarangan Sutradhar, a text by Raja Bhoj, a scholar king Raja Bhoj of Malwa. So this Samarangan Sutradhar was compiled or composed 1,000 years back. And he has actually given instructions how to prepare the line drawings. There are instructions for the site supervisor. So, and there are instructions how to make construction machinery. That how are you going to build construction machinery?
And do we have any instruments like rulers or the scale or the whatever?
Like as I mentioned about Baudhayan's Sulba Sutra. The Sulba Sutra is a text on geometry. So basically using like if we look at geometric constructions, so they were done using a straight edge and a compass or a thread. Those were used to kind of mark out the jobs. Like if we look at say Kailash temple at Ellora, the Elephanta caves, they are magnificent sculptures and magnificent structures. So if they were not marked out or planned before carving out that hillock, they would have been magnificent failures rather than magnificent. Okay, I don't have the details, exact details, what tools or what instruments they used, because I'm not from the archaeology or history background. But yeah, as an engineer, I can really appreciate that they must have used sophisticated engineering procedures, or what we say, like industrial engineering processes, or they must have used amazing techniques, or like before, like as a mechanical engineer, we say that on a tool room, we mark the job before cutting them on a machine tool. And you have to be very precise using your vernier calipers or micrometer screw gauges. So they must have also used such geometric principles to mark out the various parts, structural elements or the architecture elements of temples, the projections, what we say, the shikhar. So they must have used such instruments, which I don't have the details. But yeah, that actually motivates me to do more research on those texts, maybe.
Vaibhav Bhattji, you can go next.
Yes. So coming back to like we had so much of legacy of mathematics and many other knowledge, and most of the invention I think has happened maybe 150 years ago or 200 years ago. Most of the invention. And why do you think that the other countries have done so progress so fast without having so much of legacy, and we are having so much of legacy and we are not able to progress? What is the reason?
There may be various factors for that, various factors or various reasons for that. Like we say that Europe had gone through a dark ages, and then you had the Renaissance. Maybe even India went through its own, like when we don't acknowledge our own legacy, when we ignore our own legacy, maybe we arrive at such situation. I've written a series of articles on Pingar's Chand Sastra, and of course I've read other people's translations, and I've read other people's research papers and research articles on that subject. And I've written my articles on that. And I come from mechatronics background, and so I'm both a researcher in the field of computer science and mechanical engineering and maths. And then I've written articles on Pingar's Chand Sastra that 2200 years back we had some of the most sophisticated algorithms. Like if you, everyone must have heard about Donald Nath. He is supposed to be the guru of all computer gurus. And he has written the amazing volumes, The Art of Computer Programming. And he has quoted Pingaracharya's Chand Sastra some 2 to 3 times. There are references in Art of Computer Programming by Donald Nath that some of the earliest and the most sophisticated algorithms were generated by Pingar in his work Chand Sastra. And I've written in detail about Pingar's Chand Sastra. On YouTube, you can find my video lectures on Pingar's Chand Sastra. On my blog and other web platforms, I've written articles on Pingar's Chand Sastra, quoting the sutra and then writing about it, and how we do modern mathematics in computer science. You can find the parallels. I've written from primary sources. So maybe we were just not acknowledging and ignoring our ancient Indian legacy. We read and talk about WhatsApp forward or what is published in say tabloids, and we never refer the primary sources. Like Indian mathematics textbooks, they never refer to, say, Indian mathematicians. They refer more to European mathematicians. I'm not saying that European mathematicians have not done original work or good work, but we should not be ignoring our own glorious legacy. Yeah, I hope that answers your query.
Sanjay Verma ji, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chandrahas ji, for such an enlightening.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, so I mean, just a comment, you can say, Manjul Bhargav, he is a field mathematics awardee, and I think he doesn't hesitate in mentioning the contribution of Indian, rishis. in maths. Like I think the Fibonacci numbers were basically
Matra Mero.
Yeah, so I think Madhavacharya or Hemendra, I don't recall
Hemachandra and Halayod.
Yeah,
Hemachandra and Halayod.
Yeah, so I think he's, I have seen some videos where he kind of openly, and he mentions them when he's teaching.
I watched his video lectures, and they are very, very, very nice video lectures. I have also given video lectures on similar lines, that how Pingadacharya created a binary number system. And then I'll be submitting one more article on Pingada's Chand Sastra tomorrow. Like Pingad had used something similar to octal number system, like Gana. Musicians, they use Yamarataj Bhanasalagam groups. Gana. Yamarataj Bhanasalagam. So they are similar to your octal numbers. Like going from 000 to 111. So you're grouping 3 bits into octal digit. So soon that article will be published, or I will post it on my blog. So I've written a series of around 6 articles on Pingad's Chand Sastra, means how he developed the binary number system, how he created the algorithms for converting a decimal number into binary number, a binary number into decimal. So how do you calculate 2 raised to 21 quickly? And how you create a Meru Prastar. So one shortcoming that when I was in school, we were not encouraged to learn Sanskrit. So which now, of course, I am learning Sanskrit. Otherwise, we can actually pick up the primary sources and read it and study them ourselves. MD Srinivas, who is an expert in Sanskrit and Indian mathematics, there is a series of video lectures of MD Srinivas, Professor Ramasubramanian from IIT Mumbai. MD Srinivas ji, he has said that there are lakhs of manuscripts on Indian sciences and mathematics which have yet to be studied and translated.
Exactly,
What we know is Bhaskaracharya's Lilavati, Brahmasphut Siddhant, Arya Bhattiya, Bodhayan's Sulba Sutra. But there are still more such texts which have yet to be studied and translated.
Exactly.
And we, like Sambarangan Sutradhar, people have been quoting about, say, temples which are 1,000-year-old, 1,400-year-old. If we go to Dholavira, this is some 5,000, 6,000-year-old city. And they are very precise structures. You have kind of ceramic pipes, pipelines for fresh water, pipelines for sewage or drainage, and you had standardized weights and measures across, and you can say the northern part of Indian subcontinent. Standard. So, and Lothal, which is the synthetic port, artificial port constructed some 6,000 years back with locks and gates like those you find in Suez Canal or Panama Canal, with locks and gates. So you can have a boat and you can have dry docks for boat construction or repairing of boats. So, of course, technology was there, and you can't have technology without, say, mathematics.
All right, Chandraji, I think we have run out of time. You can send questions to Chandrahas ji. You can contact him on his blog. He's on Facebook. He's on all the different social medias. It was a wonderful session we had, and we're looking forward to having Chandrahas ji again.
Thank you.
And once again, thank you, Chandrahas ji.
Namaste.